Hello everyone, welcome to this new video. Remember that last extract ended with the father saying, ほら、あれが小学校だよ。千尋、新しい学校だよ。And so, let's get started.
結構綺麗な学校じゃない。
結構綺麗な学校じゃない。Two things to spot. The first one is that you have na between 綺麗 and 学校. So we've studied it in the first video. Don't forget that between a na adjective and a noun, you have to add na. So 綺麗学校 is impossible. You can't say that. So it will be 綺麗な学校. Also, know that 綺麗 is a na adjective. So basically, na adjectives should be adjectives that don't end with e. Adjectives ending with e are then e adjective. So you might think that kirei is an exception because it ends with e. But actually it's not, because you don't say kirei, kirei. No, basically you should say kirei, kirei. Remember that in Japanese, e plus e is actually a long e. Just like sensei, you don't say sensei, you say sensei. And so it's not a real e per se, because it's just a e to make the e sound longer. So it's not a real e as in shiroi, kuroi, atarashii. You see? So it's not an exception per se, but you can learn it by heart. Kirei is indeed an adjective. Then, janai, for people who only learned the polite conjugation, janai is dewa arimasen or ja arimasen, but in plain or casual form. So it's des, it's just des, but the negation, the casual or plain negation. So here you have the whole conjugation chart for des. So first the polite form, but you should know it. Just know, maybe you didn't study this. Ja is the contraction, the oral contraction of dewa. So when you use dewa arimasen, it kind of sounds like written language or very formal language. So in everyday life, you might rather hear ja, jarimasen. And so same thing for the plain form, it can be janai or dewanai. Dewanai will be written language, while janai will be oral speech. So you have da, janai, datta, and janakatta. And so we didn't really talk about it until now, but what is the plain form? Because we are opposing the polite form with the plain form from the beginning, but we never explained what it was in details. So you use the plain form when you don't need or you can't add politeness. So you have three main situations in casual speech, because in casual speech you don't need politeness, you will use this plain form. In essays, thesis, everything that is scientific, basically you should use the plain form. You never use politeness in scientific writings. Why? Because in scientific writings you don't really talk to someone. So you don't need to use politeness. And so the standard way of writing scientific things is to always use the plain form. And then the last reason is for grammatical rules, so that we've started to learn. In most situations, when you're in the middle of a sentence, you shouldn't use a polite form. So for example, in relatives and before toki, you cannot use a polite form because the polite form should kinda end the sentence. So the plain form is used not only to talk casually, but it's also used in scientific literature actually not only scientific, but whatever, and it has to be used for grammar reasons too. And last thing, you see that you have many different ways of saying the negation. For the moment, just know how to recognize them. Just know that ja is an oral contraction. And the second thing that you can know is that nowadays, when you want to be polite, but like standard polite, you see, not much too polite or etc., etc., you will use janai desu. Ja arimasen is not used so much anymore, so you will hear janai desu more than ja arimasen. Janai desu, I know it's a bit weird because janai is already desu, since it's desu negation. So it's a bit weird because it's like desu. Janai desu, you see desu plus des. Actually, before, this kind of conjugations didn't exist and it shouldn't exist. But nowadays, Japanese people are using it more and more. So it's not a form in itself. You see that it's kind of a mix between polite form and plain form. And it's just used in oral speech, never in writing, but nowadays it's the form that you will hear the most when you want to be like standard polite. So try to learn this whole conjugation because anyway you will need it, and it will help for the verbs too because the endings are the same as for the verbs. Nai for negation, ta for past, and nakata for past negation. Okay, so let's go back to our sentence. Basically, you should be able to translate it, so press pause and do it. So, it's just like a why des structure, 結構きれいな学校です, but instead of having des, you have じゃない, so a negation and an interrogation. So, じゃない plus question mark, isn't it? 結構きれいな学校, a quite beautiful school. Isn't it a quite beautiful school? So know that in oral speech, you don't really use ka when you want to make a question. You should have learned that when you want to make a question in Japanese, you should add ka at the end of the sentence. But in oral speech, basically you don't use ka, and when you use it, it's for actually specific situations. So here she could have said 結構きれいな学校ではありませんか? If it was textbook, you would have 結構きれいな学校ではありませんか? It's the same, but it's just that here she is first not being polite and she speaks kind of real oral speech Japanese.
前の方がいいもん。
Okay, now next sentence. Then Chihiro answers, 前の方がいいもん。前の方がいいもん。So, here, what's new is の方が, の方が. So, 前 means before and い means good. So, with the context, you might guess what she means, what she wants to say. But let's understand this no hoga. So hoga is used when you want to make a comparison. So a comparison is when, well, you compare things. Like, for example, I am stronger than you. Mountains are better than sea. This phone is more expensive than this one. You see, you make a comparison. And so what you have to remember is that the word before ho is the winner of the comparison. So when I say winner, I don't mean in the good way. It doesn't mean that it's the best thing, but like when you say Tanaka is weaker than Sato, Tanaka wins the comparison. He is weaker. He wins. You see? So when I say winner, I mean grammatically speaking, of course. It is colder. It is more expensive. It is weaker. You see, they all win the comparison. So you can use hoga with almost everything. So a noun plus no hoga. Okay, it's fine. We've learned that when you want to link a noun with another noun, you use no. And yes, originally, ho is a noun. And so once again, you see that Japanese basic grammar rules apply to everything. So since ho is originally a noun, if you want to link it with another noun, you use no. Then for e adjectives, then you don't add anything. You stick them together. For na adjectives, then you have to add na. Benri na ho. Shizuka na ho. And for verbs, then just like in a relative, you stick it. And then one last little thing, then when you say ho ga I, so ho ga plus I, it then means better, because I is good. So when you use it in a comparison, it becomes better. So let's see some few examples. Kita no hou ga samui. So since you have no hou ga after kita, you understand that kita wins the comparison. So north is colder. Then Tanaka-san no hou ga tsuyoi. So try to translate it. So we understand that Tanaka wins the comparison. So Tanaka-san is stronger. Then samui hou ga ii. Same thing, try to translate it. So literally, cold is better. So it's better when cold. Like for example, you were asking your doctor if it's better for the body that it's cold or hot when you sleep. You don't know. Is it better to turn on the heat or not? And the doctor answers, samui hou ga ii, and not atsui hou ga ii. He could have answered, atsui hou ga ii, it's better when it's hot. Hot is better. But no, samui hou ga ii. Cold is better. It's better when it's cold. So samui wins the comparison. And then last one with the verb, this time, hanasu hou ga muzukashii desu. So try to translate. So speaking is more difficult. So it's more difficult to speak. So for example, you are learning Japanese and you tell your friends it's more difficult to speak than to write, for example. So you see comparison, and what's before hou ga wins. So hanasu hou ga muzukashii. It's more difficult to speak. You see, it wins it. It's more difficult. But here we kind of have a problem, because try then to translate our sentence. So literally it would mean before was better. So of course we understand what she means. The mother says, "Oh, isn't it a beautiful school?" And she answers, before was better. But let's get into details. So this part might confuse beginners. So if some of you think it's too complicated, it's confusing you, then it's okay. Skip it and just remember what we've studied. So hou ga, comparison, and that's it, and go next. It's for people who maybe are more advanced and want to get into details, into things that are a little bit more complicated. So try to translate these two sentences. So press pause, try to do it. So first one, oki hou ga ii. So big is better, literally. So it's better when big. Here you can imagine many different situations, including one that I won't talk about. But for example, you're talking about phones and you ask if it's better when they're big or when they're little, and the person answers it's better when they're big because it's got more functions, etc., whatever. And second one, benri na hou ga ii, it's the same thing. Convenient is better, literally, so it's better when it's convenient. So for example, you don't like when phones are too big, you'd rather have a convenient phone, etc., etc. But you have another possibility here. You can translate it another way. So be careful because a noun can be implied. For example, oki hogai could be translated as the big one is better, and benina hogai, the convenient one is better. So in many situations, it will be used when you have a choice to make between two things. You have a big phone and you have a convenient phone, and so you imply that you are talking about this or that phone. Originally, ho, as I told you, is a noun that means direction or way. And so, once again, imagine that you have two phones and you're talking about these two phones. You will tend into this direction, which would be the blue phone, for example, the big blue phone, or you would tend into that direction, which would be the red little phone. And so now let's imagine a conversation between a salesman and a customer. So the salesman is kind of presenting the two phones, and so he says, "Oki ho ga ninki desu." So try to translate. So the big one's popular. This direction is popular. And then he adds, "Akai ho ga benri desu." So then he goes into that direction. So the red one is convenient. So the big one is popular, but the red one is convenient. And so the customer answers, "Chisai hou ga ii desu." So the little one is better. So actually it means I prefer the small one. I will take the small one. So he goes into that direction. That direction is good. So I prefer the small one. So hogai is used a lot when you're making a choice between two options and you want to say, okay, I'm going for this one or I'm going for that one. So it's a bit difficult to explain, but anyway, you can remember that sometimes nouns are implied. And in our sentence, well, a noun is implied. Mai no hou ga ii implies mai no gakkou no hou ga ii. So the school of before, literally. So the last school, my school before was better. So I prefer the previous one. So once again, if you're a bit confused with all of this, just keep it. It's fine. It's just that I sometimes try to make contents for people who are more advanced in Japanese. But anyway, we will encounter many situations where you will have implied nouns. So we will study it again and again and again. So don't worry, if you skip it right now, you won't lack anything. Anyway, you've seen that even without understanding that a noun was implied, just translating by before was better, you understood what Chihiro means, so it's fine. So last thing we have to study in this sentence is this mon at the end. So once again, remember, when you have something weird at the end of a sentence, at first you can just skip it, because in many situations it will just be some kind of speech precisions, how you are saying the information, how you are conveying information to the listener. So it's just like yo and ne, you see? In most situations, you won't even be able to translate it in English. So if you just want to understand like the main content of the sentence, you don't even need to understand it. But so, man is used when you want to make your point in a position of what you've been told. So here indeed, the mother says that it's a beautiful school, and Chihiro does not agree, and she wants her mother to know that she does not agree. So it's used in three main situations: when contradicting someone, when complaining, or when making excuses. And of course, it can be a mix of all of this. And so it means that when you use mon, often it gives a whimsical or a sulking tone, you see, because you're complaining, you're making excuses, etc., etc. So it's used by women, like basically men should not use it. And it's used to kind of sound cute because originally it's used a lot by children. Like adults should not use this, and you understand why, because adults should not complain, they should not make excuses, they should not bluntly contradict the listener, etc., etc. And so, since it sounds a little bit childish, it can also sound cute, but you have to be very careful because if you use it too much or in the wrong way, then you can sound very childish and so very whimsical, and it can be a little bit annoying, you see? So 3 examples. For example, you're talking with your boyfriend and he tells you that you won't be able to do something, whatever it is, but no, you can do it. And so he says, "Dekirumo." Yes, of course, I can do it. You see, you try to make your point with this little sucking tone, you see? Second example, your mother taught you to never approach dogs that you don't know, but you are walking with your mother, you see a dog, and you go pat him. And so she scolds you, your mother scolds you, and so you say, "Datte, kawaii mo." So datte is like but you see but when you're making excuses. So but it's cute. Trying to make some excuses to complain, to explain what you've done by making your point. It's too cute, like, so of course I'm going to pat him, let me do it, you see? And once again, you really have this whimsical sucking tone in this. And last one, your mother tries to wake up in the morning to go to school, and you say, "Kaze damon." So kaze is when you have the flu, for example, when you're sick. And so, but I'm sick. So you don't want to wake up, you don't want to go to school, you're sick, and you think that it's more than enough to not go to school. And so it's "Kaze damon," so I won't wake up, let me hear. So you see, every time you try to make your point in opposition of what the other person tells you or does to you. So that is mon. And now let's get to the kanji part. So the kanji for this video is the kanji that you use in gakko. It means study, learning, science. So the Chinese pronunciation is gaku, and the Japanese pronunciation is manabu, which is a verb. So this kanji comes from the kanji for child that originally was meant to represent a baby. It's a bit hard to tell, but why not? And so for gaku, you add something that looks like a roof. So actually it's not a roof per se, but imagine that you have a roof and under the roof you have children. And so you can imagine that it represents a school then, because where is the place where many children are gathered under a roof? Well, a school. You also have this drawing that represents a student, so a boy with a hat that indicates that he is studying. Now, as for the reading, so you have the verb manabu, which means to study, to learn. For the Chinese pronunciation, you have gakusei, so a student. The kanji for sei is the same as in sensei, for example. And then you have our shogakko. So we've seen the sho, the little, and now we have the ga. So it was contracted because you can't really say gakko. You see gakko, so it naturally gets contracted. So gakko, okay? The ku becomes a little tu with the ko that follows, but it's still the Chinese pronunciation gaku. So shogakko, sho little, gaku, well, study, learning, and ko, well, basically ko is school in itself. So a school where you study, and that is little, elementary school. And that's it for this video. So you've noticed that in the Converse series, for the moment, we study polite language and long sentences, so like pure syntactical grammar. But in the Fiction series, for the moment, we study casual oral speech and all these little things that you find in Japanese that come at the end of sentences to indicate how you want to convey informations like yo, ne, mon, etc., etc. So of course it depends on what you want to learn, but this is why I make all these videos, because we can see every part of Japanese this way. So in a few videos, we'll stop Spirited Away and we'll start to translate Shingeki no Kyojin, I think so, Attack on Titan, which will kind of mix everything. So don't forget to check the exercise at the end of the video. Subscribe if you want to know when the next video is up, and good luck!